What happens when one of radio's boldest personalities walks straight into the lion's den of daytime television and completely dismantles one of its most outspoken hosts? Today, we're breaking down the moment Howard Stern stepped onto The View and delivered a masterclass in handling someone who thought they could intimidate him. Joy Behar learned quickly that when you come for the king of shock radio, you'd better not miss. This is a story about power, ego, and what happens when someone finally calls out behavior viewers have been complaining about for years. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe how this unfolds. The tension was thick the moment Howard Stern walked onto the View set. The audience erupted in applause, but something felt different. Joy Behar sat at the table with her arms crossed, wearing the expression regular viewers knew all too well. Trouble was already brewing. She'd openly criticized Howard's style for years, calling his entertainment degrading and inappropriate on multiple occasions. Well, Joy said as Howard took his seat, her voice dripping with condescension. Look who decided to grace us with his presence. Howard Stern, the man who built an empire on shocking people and pushing boundaries. Tell me, Howard, do you ever feel responsible for lowering the standards of American media? The other hosts shifted uncomfortably. Whoopi tried to offer a calmer welcome, but Joy pushed ahead, leaning forward with the kind of intensity that signaled she wasn't interested in a friendly exchange. Howard, completely unfazed, flashed the trademark grin that had gotten him through decades of controversy. You know, Joy, that's interesting coming from someone who's made a career out of interrupting her co-hosts and talking over guests. Should I be taking notes on your approach to raising standards? The audience gasped. Joy's face flushed red as her jaw tightened. She wasn't used to guests who could match her energy, let alone turn it back on her. Excuse me? Joy snapped. I've been in this business longer than you've been relevant, Howard. I don't need some shock jock telling me how to conduct myself. Relevant? Howard chuckled, leaning back. Joy, my show reaches millions every single day. When was the last time anyone under 40 chose to watch The View? I'm just curious about your definition of relevance. The studio went silent. Joy opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to find a comeback. The hosts looked like they wanted to sink under the table. This wasn't Joy's usual script where she dominated the conversation and guests scrambled to keep up. That's completely inappropriate, Joy stammered. You can't just come on our show and insult our ratings. But you can question my entire career and my integrity. Howard shot back smoothly. This is what I find fascinating about people like you, Joy. You can dish it out all day, but the moment someone matches your energy, suddenly it's inappropriate. That's not how this works. Joy glanced toward her co-hosts for backup, but they all avoided her gaze. Sunny buried herself in her notes. Sarah focused on her coffee cup. Whoopi finally tried to intervene. Okay, let's take this down a notch and talk about Howard's new book, she suggested calmly. But Joy wasn't backing down. Her pride was wounded, and she wasn't ready to let go. No, Whoopi, I want to address this, she insisted. Howard, you've spent decades objectifying women, making crude jokes, and contributing to a culture that degrades people for entertainment. And now you want to act like you're some kind of victim because I called you out. Howard's expression shifted slightly as he leaned forward, his tone steady but sharper. Joy, let me ask you something. How many times have you interrupted your female co-hosts this week alone? How many times have you dismissed their opinions or talked over them when they were making a point? Because, from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're describing your own behavior. The camera caught Joy's stunned expression perfectly. Her eyes widened as she realized someone had just said that to her. On national television. The audience hung on every word. That's not the same thing, Joy sputtered, her quick wit nowhere to be found. Isn't it, though? Howard pressed. You've built your career on being the person who says what others won't, the tough questioner who doesn't let people off easy. So why is it different when someone does the same thing to you? Why do the rules change when you're the one in the hot seat? Joy looked around again, hoping for help. But her co-hosts were locked in a mixture of fascination and dread. She'd boxed herself in, and Howard wasn't done yet. I think there's a difference between asking tough questions and being deliberately provocative for shock value, Joy said, trying to regain control. Oh, absolutely, Howard nodded. The difference, he said, is that I'm honest about what I do. I've never pretended to be anything other than who I am. But you sit at this table every day acting like some kind of moral authority, while you bully your co-hosts and talk down to guests who don't share your worldview. At least I own my behavior. The tension in the studio was thick enough to slice. Joy's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. You could practically see her brain scrambling for a tactic, anything that would throw Howard off balance. It wasn't working. She set her water down a little too hard, the sound echoing across the silent set. Her face had shifted from red to a deeper, angrier shade. She tried to gather herself, but Howard wasn't giving her room to breathe. You know, what I find interesting, Joy, he continued, his tone casual but razor-sharp. You talk about degrading people for entertainment. But wasn't it just last week that you spent an entire segment mocking that young actress's outfit? What did you call her again? A fashion disaster who needed an intervention? Joy opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The co-hosts exchanged uneasy glances as Howard went on. And the week before that, didn't you spend 10 minutes joking about that politician's weight? Really personal stuff about his appearance. But somehow that's different from what I do. Because you claim it's political commentary? That's not the same thing, Joy finally said, her voice strained. When we critique public figures, it's about holding them accountable. Accountable for what exactly? Howard asked. Their clothing? Their body weight? Their appearance? He leaned back with a knowing smile. Come on, Joy. Even you don't believe that. You do it because it gets laughs and keeps people watching. And that's fine. Just be honest about it instead of pretending you're operating from the moral high ground. Sarah finally attempted a rescue. Howard, I think what Joy means is that there's a difference between commentary and exploitation. Howard glanced at Sarah with a polite smile. Sarah, I appreciate you trying to help your colleague, but I'm pretty sure Joy can speak for herself. Unless, of course, she suddenly lost the ability to interrupt people and dominate conversations. The line was so cleanly delivered that a few audience members couldn't help themselves. Small, nervous laughs escaped. Joy's face went an even deeper red. I don't dominate conversations, Joy snapped through clenched teeth. I facilitate discussion. Is that what we're calling it? Howard raised an eyebrow. Joy, I've watched clips of this show for years, and I can count on one hand the number of times you've let a guest finish a full thought. You've interrupted me 17 times in the last 5 minutes alone. That's not true, Joy protested. Want me to have the producers roll it back? Howard offered. Or better yet, let's test it right now. Let me speak for 60 seconds without interruption. Just 60. Joy's eyes darted around the table. She was trapped. If she interrupted him, she'd prove his point. If she didn't, she'd look controlled. Either way, she lost. Fine, she said sharply, crossing her arms. Go ahead. Howard smiled, checked his watch, and began. Perfect. Starting now. You know, Joy, this whole exchange is the perfect example of what's wrong with media today. People like you convince yourselves that your opinions matter more than everyone else's simply because you have a platform. You sit here every day lecturing Americans about tolerance and respect, but you don't show either to the people. Right beside you. You say you champion women's voices, yet you constantly talk over and dismiss the women on your own panel. Sunny brings incredibly insightful legal analysis, and you cut her off mid-sentence, Sarah offers a generational perspective you don't have, and you treat her like she's naive whenever she disagrees with you. And Whoopi, someone with more life experience and wisdom than most people in this industry, you argue with her like she's a rookie. As he spoke, Joy fought a visible war inside her body. Her mouth kept opening and snapping shut. Her hands were clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. She practically vibrated with the effort of staying silent. When Howard finished and glanced at his watch, he looked back at her with playful surprise. "Would you look at that? You actually made it the whole minute." Joy erupted. "How dare you sit there and psychoanalyze me and my relationships with my co-hosts?" Joy snapped, her voice rising. "You don't know anything about what goes on behind the scenes or how we support each other." "You're absolutely right, Joy," Howard replied smoothly. "I don't know what happens behind the scenes. I only know what I see on camera, which is you bulldozing conversations and treating your co-hosts like props in your one-woman show. But hey, if that's different from how you really are off camera, then maybe the problem is that you're just not very good at hiding your true personality when the cameras are rolling." The other hosts were staring openly now, unable to look away. Whoopi glanced toward the producers off-screen, clearly wishing someone would cut to a commercial. But this was live TV at its most volatile. "You know what, Howard?" Joy's voice trembled. Anger, humiliation, or both. "I've been doing television for decades. I've interviewed presidents, celebrities, world leaders, and I've never had anyone speak to me this way. And that," Howard said, his tone almost sympathetic, making the blow land harder, "is exactly the problem. No one has ever challenged you because they were too polite, too professional, or too afraid of the backlash. They let you get away with behavior that would get anyone else labeled a bully because you've convinced everyone that your rudeness is just passion for the issues." He leaned forward slightly. "But I'm not running for office. I don't need your endorsement, and I'm not trying to get invited back, so I can say what everyone else has been thinking, but was too nice to tell you." Joy was visibly shaking. "This is completely unprofessional," she said, turning desperately toward Whoopi. "Whoopi, are we really going to let him sit here and attack me on our own show?" Whoopi finally spoke, but not in the way Joy expected. "Joy, he's responding to questions you asked. You opened this door when you went after his character. He's defending himself." The betrayal on Joy's face was sharp and immediate. She had expected backup. Instead, her co-hosts watched in stunned fascination as Howard dismantled her piece by piece. "Defending himself?" Joy's voice cracked. "He's been attacking me personally for 10 minutes. Have I, though?" Howard tilted his head. "Or have I been pointing out patterns in your behavior that anyone who watches this show can see? There's a difference between personal attacks and professional observations. You questioned my character and integrity based on your feelings about my content. I'm commenting on your behavior based on what you show the world." He shrugged. "If you don't like what I'm saying, maybe the problem isn't my observations." The energy in the studio had completely shifted. What began as Joy's attempt to corner Howard had flipped on her, fast and brutally. She scanned the table again, searching for an ally. There were none. "You know what, Howard?" Joy's tone sharpened into desperation. "Maybe the problem is that you're just another entitled man who can't handle being challenged by a strong woman." Howard's eyebrows shot up. For the first time, he actually looked surprised. "Oh, wow. There it is. The gender card. I was wondering when that would show up." "It's not a card, it's reality," Joy shot back, leaning forward aggressively. "You can't stand that a woman is calling you out on your problematic behavior, so you're trying to tear me down." "Joy, Joy, Joy." Howard shook his head with genuine disappointment. "Do you really want to go there? Because if we're talking about how I treat women, then we need to talk about how you treat the women at this table." Joy's face drained of color. She knew she'd walked straight into a trap. Let's talk about strong women, Howard continued, his voice calm and devastating. Sunny, who graduated law school, worked as a prosecutor, and knows more about the legal system than most people in this city. How many times have you talked over her when she's explaining something you clearly don't understand? Sarah represents an entire generation of women navigating a different political world than the one you grew up in, and you dismiss her perspective as naive any time she disagrees with you. And Whoopi, who's achieved more than most people dream of, you argue with her like she's some rookie who doesn't know what she's doing. Each statement landed with surgical precision. Joy's expression cycled through anger, embarrassment, and something close to panic. That's not how I treat them, she said weakly. Really? Howard turned to the others. Let's ask them. Ladies, let me ask you something. Honestly. In all the years you've worked with Joy, how many times has she cut you off mid-sentence, waved away your opinions, or talked right over you when you were making a point? The silence that followed was instant and heavy. Sunny and Sarah exchanged a tense glance, both clearly uncomfortable being put on the spot, but the truth was written all over their faces. Whoopi looked torn, unsure whether to throw Joy a lifeline or let the moment play out. This is exactly what I mean about you playing the gender card, Howard said as he turned back to Joy. You invoke feminism when it benefits you, but you don't actually practice it. You don't uplift women. You smother their voices with your own. Joy was unraveling. Her usual quick-fire retorts were gone, replaced by a frantic scramble to regain control. This is absurd, she snapped. I'm not going to sit here and be lectured by someone who's built an empire exploiting women. And there's another deflection, Howard replied calmly. Instead of addressing what I'm actually saying, you pivot. But here's the truth, Joy. My audience chooses to listen to me. Your co-hosts don't have a choice. They show up to work with you every day. So which one of us is really exploiting women? The question hit the table like a bomb. Joy processed it slowly, and the realization that she had completely lost the reins of the interview was written across her face. I think we should move on to another topic, she whispered. Oh, now you want to change the subject? Howard laughed. Not cruelly, but with genuine amusement. 5 minutes ago, you were ready to dissect my entire career and question my integrity. But the moment someone holds up a mirror to your behavior, it's suddenly time to move on. Joy's wide-eyed look toward the producers was a silent plea for rescue. But with ratings skyrocketing, no one was cutting away from this. Whoopi finally stepped in. Howard, I think you've made your point. Have I, though? He replied. Joy started this with a very clear agenda: to embarrass me on national TV, to question my integrity, to paint herself as morally superior. But the second her behavior gets the same level of scrutiny, suddenly it's too far. Joy made one last attempt to salvage her footing. I was asking legitimate questions about the impact of your content on society. No, Joy, Howard said firmly. You were trying to humiliate me because you don't like my style of entertainment. That's not journalism. That's a personal attack. And the irony? You've spent the last 15 minutes proving every criticism people make about you. The blow landed clean and precise. Joy's face collapsed into a look of total defeat. I think, she said slowly, struggling to compose herself, that the audience can judge our approaches for themselves. Absolutely, Howard said with a pleasant smile. And judging by ratings and engagement, they already have. As the camera pulled back for commercial, Joy sat slumped in her chair, looking like she'd gone 10 rounds with a heavyweight. Howard, meanwhile, looked as relaxed as he had at the start. Calm, cool, completely unfazed. What began as Joy's attempt to expose Howard Stern had become a public breakdown of her own behavior. She picked a fight with someone who'd spent decades perfecting the art of verbal combat, and he dismantled her with precision. Sunny, Sarah, and Whoopi sat in stunned silence, still processing what they'd witnessed. In under 20 minutes, Howard had articulated criticisms viewers had whispered for years, but had never heard said out loud. One thing was undeniable. Joy Behar had learned the hard way that if you come for someone who never backs down, you'd better be prepared for the consequences. Howard Stern hadn't just defended himself, he'd delivered a masterclass.